Fantasy Baseball on Deck, everybody. This is Austin, and we're here to talk about Jose Abreu's transition to the Houston Astros, their new first baseman for the next couple of years. This free agency signing is a big name attached to a big headline, going to the best team in baseball. But what does it actually mean to us as fantasy baseball managers? And so kind of what I want to dig into today. What's the actual value to us as we prepare for 2023? Before we get into his stats and kind of depicting how you just decide whether or not this is valuable to us, I want to go over my 4 concept goals and takeaways that I want you to walk away with after watching this video. So number 1, and first and foremost, as always, this channel is positioned to teach you how to evaluate players using universal concepts to help you make more educated and confident decisions moving forward with your fantasy baseball team. So essentially, I want to teach you how to think. I don't want to just tell you what I think. That's the true value of the show, and that's why we work together and why I care about you and you guys care about me. So number 2 goal of this show, when you're analyzing player stats, I want you to understand the difference between actual value and perceived value. And then also, I want you to be able to single out the difference between an individual player and stat and an independent versus a dependent player and or stat. So that is number 2 goal. Number 3 goal is I'm going to give you, and you're going to memorize the most valuable equation in all of fantasy baseball when you're evaluating offensive productivity in fantasy baseball. Really simple equation, and we'll get to that and talk about it a billion times. And number 4, we are going to determine together whether or not Jose Abreu is the right guy for your fantasy baseball lineup. So let's get into that today, right now. So when you're going down to kind of like depict like whether or not a player is heading in the right direction in regards to age, I always just like to just take a look and just figure out like really, really quickly, are they staying the same? Are they regressing, or are they improving? And it's pretty easy, and or kind of like 2020 is a little bit of a wrench because this is when he won the AL MVP. But in a 60-game season, the wear and tear on a mid-30s year-old player in 60 games is very different than them having to play in an entire season on 162 games. So he's always been readily available and healthy for the most part throughout his career. So injuries are not an issue, but just the overall wear and tear, he's not going to be as powerful. He's not going to be as fast. He's never been fast. But, what does that mean moving forward into age 36 season coming up? Turns 36 in January. He'll be closer to 37 years old for the entire 2022 season, given the dates and such. So how do we look at this? First, I want to highlight the independent stats. So what stats are most important when you're evaluating a player, regardless of like if they play on the Dodgers or if they play on the Pittsburgh Pirates? How do we value and evaluate like the true value of an individual producing at the plate, whether the bases are loaded or the bases are empty? And these stats that are really important are the home runs, the total bases being most important. And it sucks that depending on what site you're on, and we're going to have to jump around and look at things, but they don't make it easy. But total base is the most important stat in all of fantasy baseball when you're evaluating specifically offensive productivity. And then also we're going to go and look at stolen bases. So anytime that you have a player who is maybe lacking in the total bases category, a lot of times they're able to make up for it with stolen bases. And a good example of that would be like Trey Turner, who has a lower total base per hit average, but he's constantly making himself more valuable, exceptionally more valuable than his peers, because he's putting himself into positions to earn those bonus points, those dependent bonus points like runs. So like if he steals a base, he did that on his own. That's an independent action, but a dependent action is him getting knocked into home. So whoever's behind him in the batting order, he's relying on them to get him that extra point. So he didn't do that by himself. So that's a dependent stat would be a run, but an independent stat would be a stolen base. This is kind of things that we have to sort of measure out while we're evaluating these players moving forward. And it gets complicated at times, but as long as we kind of like understand the concepts and like where we're focusing our time and efforts, things should always be a little more easy to understand and a little clearer when you're making decisions. So instead of looking at all of this block for too long, we're just going to see overall that in 2021 he had 30 home runs. That's awesome. In 2022 he had 15. That's not what you want out of a player who's hitting third in the lineup for what was supposed to be an extremely overachieving team in Chicago White Sox last year. Didn't happen, but as you've even seen before, he's kind of jumped up and back and forth between high home run guy and mid home run guy. So not what you want to see going into age 36. That's the first thing that I worry about. He's never stolen bases, so that doesn't matter. But like the main concern with me is his regression in total bases, and this isn't a very big difference between 21 and 2022, but just in his position alone, just first baseman, in 2021 had a better season than he did in 2022, so he's regressing in every category. But he was 7th in 2021 in total bases. So individually, when he got up to the plate, and if you don't know what total bases means, thank you for sitting in with me on this explanation. Total bases is a score and really a measure of each individual hit, not plate appearance, not at bats, but every time that you make a hit, you get a score of 1 through 4, 1, 2, 3, or 4 added to your total base count for the ongoing for the entire season. So if I was to go up and get a hit, I got a single, that's 1 point towards my total base total. If I got a double, 2 points, triple, 3 points, home run, 4 points. And what we really want to, and then kind of a preview to the equation is it's essentially just total bases divided by your hits will give you how many total bases per hit. And the closest, and like what you want as a player on a player on your team is to be as close to 2. You want your players in fantasy baseball, each one of them to be averaging as close to a double, if not over, as you can, because that's really showing that like they're hitting for power and they're making the most of their opportunities. And we'll kind of get into the importance of that through like real life examples here in just like a minute. So he's regressing, and that's not necessarily good. But instead of just looking at these numbers, let's look like a real life example to really illustrate the importance of this. So last season, we're looking at the number 9 and the number 10 overall first baseman for just this past year. Jose Abreu being number 10, Christian Walker being number 9, and just across first baseman. So first off, Jose Abreu batting the 3rd spot in what should have been a playoff competing Chicago White Sox team. Finished 10th in his position alone. That's just not very like good. It's not a good outlook moving forward. So hitting the 3 spot. Similarly, Christian Walker, who is not on a good offensive team, also hitting the 3 and 4 spot, really high RBI spots. These are the guys that you're relying on to really get, that 100 RBIs and 100 runs per year. But like, how do they get to those numbers? It's really focusing on the total bases. So even though, they're not too far off of these total bases scores. So like Christian Walker, hit just over Abreu totally for the entire year. So 268 versus 277, but this equated to a 30 point advantage to Christian Walker. But here's where it gets really interesting. Like Christian Walker had 30 less hits in the entire season. So I don't want to go over there. Christian Walker had 30 less hits for the entire season. He had 140 hits compared to 183 hits. So actually, Christian Walker had 43 less hits for the entire season. In comparison, Jose Abreu had 43 more hits and scored 30 less points than Christian Walker because Jose Abreu was averaging 1.4 total bases per hit, meaning that and 70% of his hits were singles. So, and he's extra limited because he can't run a whole lot. And essentially you're getting into a position where 70% of your hits are singles. You're going to have to have people on second base that are fast, or any person on third base already ready for you hitting in the 3rd spot of the lineup, which just isn't going to happen super often because you're supposed to be the guy that really drives the ball into the gaps over the fence to get those guys in. So super inefficient from a power perspective. That's just not his game anymore. He's hitting for high average. He's getting a ton of hits, but it's just not. That's not a valuable stat. It's a perceived value stat, and it sucks that we grew up our entire lives. And the first thing that's it's easy to understand. You look at how many hits a player had in the game and what their average is on the season, but it truly doesn't matter. It truly doesn't measure the value of a player. The hits perceived value, though it's an individual stat, like an individual an independent stat, like they're doing it on their own, it's not valuable. So really focusing on the total bases and understanding that 277 versus 268 doesn't even tell the exact like whole story, but truly understanding that like more total bases means a more independent player. And Christian Walker had 43 less hits and outscored Jose Abreu by 30 points in fantasy baseball. So like that's huge. It's just like understanding like really the significance of the data that we're focusing on, is really important, moving forward. And again, really just total bases divided by hits that will give you an average between 1 and 4, and you want as close to 2 as you possibly can. It's really the most realistic. Guys that will be competing, getting all-star ballots and competing for MVPs per league. So let's go to Jose Abreu's more relatable counterparts of what I think he's going to kind of relate to this upcoming season. So I've got a list. I've got Jose Abreu. These are all 2022 stats that we're going to focus on, except Michael Brantley at the end, but he's kind of the finale, exciting thing that everybody could probably relate to as well because he's going to Houston. Anyways, Jose Abreu compared to Jeff McNeil and Luis Arraez were wildly similar this past season. So they are all basically like glorified leadoff hitters at this point. Super high average guys that cannot run. So they have either in Minnesota's case, Luis Arraez is hitting leadoff because they don't truly have a fast leadoff hitter that has been reliable. So they just keep putting him up there, even though he can't run. His average is crazy high, but he really should be a 6th batting spot hitter guy, moving forward, traditionally in baseball concerns. Looking at Jeff McNeil, who is on one of the best offenses in all of baseball, top 3 offenses past year in 2022. He was the regular 6 hitter in for the Mets, and he had very, very similar stats to Jose Abreu. Looking at their runs, looking at their home runs, Jose Abreu was producing more power by a little, but like their total bases per at bat were just about the same. Like this is the thing that's a little scary. It's like Jose Abreu's in a primetime spot. He's hitting the 3-hole every single day, and what should have been a very good offense, surrounded by MVP talent that was just kind of hurt off and on. And Jeff McNeil, who was in a top 3 offense, which is what Jose Abreu is moving to in Houston, and will be hitting the 6-hole like Jeff McNeil does in at New York. Jeff McNeil was an all-star because, people see average and hits and that's what they vote for. But like he wasn't a top 10 player, even as a second baseman. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on here is like the total bases. Like it's not really that far off. These guys had a ton of hits. They had a ton of their average is really, really high. But if you don't hit for power, you're just you're stuck in the mud. There's just so little you can do. You become so dependent on others around you to make things happen that you're kind of stuck in the mud. So as we kind of we're looking at these visual effects. It's kind of hard to do everything in one take, but we're just going to keep plowing through. So why I really want to focus on the really interesting one being Michael Brantley, and we'll take away Jeff McNeil and Luis Arraez just to focus on Jose Abreu and Michael Brantley. Is in Michael Brantley also played for the 3rd ranked offense in all of baseball in 2018 with the Cleveland Indians, now Guardians. Okay, he was between the 2 and 3 hole hitter with MVP talent surrounding him in Cleveland. Jose Abreu is going to Houston to become the 6-hole hitter. Imagine if Jose Abreu was going to Houston with all the same players, the same talent, but they were going to plug him in at the 3-hole. That wouldn't make any sense, right? Well, for whatever reason, Cleveland and then Houston in 2019 and on Michael Brantley's been the 3-hole hitter, the 2 or 3-hole hitter for these two offensive juggernauts every year since. So it's like they've basically, Michael Brantley in 2018 was almost the exact same player as Jose Abreu was in 2022, playing on a way better team in a way better situation. Again, we are just imagining that Jose Abreu is going to go to the Houston Astros and play as the, again, bat as the third base batting spot. Comparing him to Michael Brantley in 2018, Michael Brantley, similar, the same stats, was 8th overall in average and was 15th overall in hits. That seems awesome, right? Well, if you dig more into it, total bases 37th overall, the exact same as Jose Abreu. Home runs 115th overall ranked across the league. Runs 30th. RBIs 67th. So Michael Brantley, who was hitting the 2 and the 3 spot in Cleveland as like the third best offense in all of baseball that year, hitting the 2 and 3 spot, the most productive spots in the batting order, still only got the the 30th most runs and the 67th most RBIs in all of baseball, even though they were a super productive offensive team, because it comes down to how productive are you individually. You can't rely on players, teammates, players to like make your guy better. It's just not, you can't draft that way. And if you are drafting that way, it's just going to lead to failure. These are perceived value stats, right? So if we focus on Michael Brantley specifically, for 2019, he's now going to the Houston Astros, just like Jose Abreu is, with a lot of the like same faces, but a younger and honestly better team. So you're going to add Carlos Correa in, which I think he's a butthole, but you have George Springer that you're adding in as well, who is an absolute mutant. Like Michael Brantley walked into and was the 3-hole hitter for that team, which I think is like just as good of an offense, if not maybe better than what they have working with right now. And Michael Brantley in 2019, his total bases, again, 39th overall, only equated to like 89 RBIs and 70 something runs. So I'll give you the exact, what I'm saying is like, even if he was moving to bat the 3-hole, the primetime spot in this awesome offense, if you're not hitting for power, it's just not worth your time, not valuable. And again, this is way longer than I thought it was going to be, but I just get like passionate about this stuff. So if we go to look at our team stats, so just last season, 2022, Jose Abreu is on the Chicago White Sox. They are second in the entire major leagues in hits, right? That seems awesome. Let's go to average. Batting average is over here. They are 5th. So, like, again, thinking that this is a playoff team, if you just like these perceived value stats we see all the time, they're not actually valuable, because what happens if we go down to home runs? What happens is we are all the way down to 22nd. And home runs, 65 more home runs were hit with 94 hits less than Houston had just this past year. So it's plus 65 home run difference. Total bases, difference of, if I can find it, total bases, there was a difference of 121 runs, and Chicago down 13. Runs, this is the big thing. Even though the White Sox had 94 more hits and 8 points better batting average for the entire season than Houston did last year, Houston scored 50 more runs than them over the entire year. And I think it's mostly because they have a Jose Abreu in that 3-hole who is just not producing individually as a truly independent player. Hitting too many singles, just not overall as productive as you need to be to actually make a difference. So, Houston was one of the best offenses in baseball last season because top up and down, they have guys just about in every part of their lineup that are going to go up there and possibly smack one out of the park. Whereas, the cornerstone of Chicago last year just didn't have it. So it's a kind of an easy way to see hits and averages just aren't really that valuable. You have to look at the total basis and see how that kind of equates to runs scored. And again, Houston's moving into Abreu's moving into Houston and taking over the 6th spot in that batting order. It scares me. There's going to be some RBI opportunities, but they're going to have to be guys in scoring position, someone fast on second or someone sitting on third base to have those RBI opportunities. He's already totally dependent, like from a base pass perspective. So those guys that are fast, that are getting doubles throughout the years, some of those guys are able to stretch singles into doubles because they have that extra leg speed. Jose Abreu is going to have to hit a ball in the gap and almost to the fence to be able to get to second, and has no opportunity to gain any like triples for that matter. So like limited in that reaction, and I'm not against slow players in any way. If you're a Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you're hitting the ball so hard that it doesn't matter. You're always getting those doubles and even opportunities for triples just because the same speed guys, but like that's the difference. You have to hit it harder, and you can't. So again, more than not, Jose Abreu is going to be getting stranded on first base with the 7, 8, and 9 hole hitters behind him. And I don't care what jersey you wear, like that, it's just not a recipe for success. In Chicago, again, he was the cleanup hitter surrounded by a lot of talent over these years. Like he had Tim Anderson, who was a batting champ. He had Luis Robert, who was a number 1 prospect in all of baseball and an MVP talent. And also Eloy Jimenez, who was at the same time the number 2 prospect in all of baseball, 40-plus home run potential, and also an MVP possible talent. So like he had the tools and didn't make it happen. And then a lot of the guys were hurt last year. But like, let's look and just see what like Christian Walker had to work with around him, and just understand how much more valuable he was in comparison to Jose Abreu, who had better players to work with. So like, this is like kind of, I really think it's a really, really good example and kind of visual of how to depict sort of thing. So, as we go on to, deciding whether or not this guy is right for us and our fantasy team, and kind of how I've been speaking the whole video, you can probably guess that Jose Abreu, ranked as number 62 overall, is crazy. Like, I don't even, as you guys have seen, I always give you guys the free cheat sheets. Like, I'll write out reviews for every single player in the top 300 plus. And Jose Abreu in the top 62 players is wild, because Jose Abreu does not have the ability to win an MVP at the season at this point in his career. And all of these players are in this area, all have MVP potential, whether they're a pitcher or a hitter. So it's like, I don't like him as a player. I like him as a person, sure. But he's not going to have the overall production. Last year, he was just inside the top 10 at first base in general. And I truly don't think that he's going to be in the top 10 this season with the Houston Astros, even though overall better offense. So that's the end of my show. I hope that you guys walked away understanding kind of how I went about that and kind of how to depict and kind of go through these problems and problem solve on your own moving forward. So feeling a little rusty since the end of the season. It's first kind of player evaluation since the end of the year. But again, look for these updates. Tristan Croft put out a November 17th update. I'm sure that Jose Abreu, who's currently at 62 since signing with the Houston Astros, might even break the top 50. And so help me God if he puts him above Mike Trout, who had the same productivity, actually better, 2 points better productivity than Aaron Judge did last year. He just didn't play as many games. So again, this is just a really good, total bases per hit. It's just a really, really good way to measure individual productivity and sort of separate the Brian Reynolds on a bad team compared to another middle of the lineup guy on a really a playoff team. So that's my show today. Have a great day, guys. I really appreciate you watching. Comment below, ask me any questions. Always here to help you. Follow if you want. And have a good day. All right, bye. Jose. Abreu, more like P.U. That's a poop stain on the front of your shirt, but nevertheless you hit them where it hurts, their pocketbook. Jose. Don't give me that look. And your beard is kind of weird. Do not draft this man at 62. Tristan Cross at it again. He must have had the flu. This man, he can't be serious. Like, he can't. Listen, guy, you don't have to interrupt me like that with the Jose thing. I don't know. Okay. Just gonna be rude about it, I guess. I don't know. Wait, when did I learn how to play the guitar? Good night, everybody. Thank you for your support. And your love. But, like, mostly for your support. Okay, go eat your vegetables and sleep or something. Okay, bye.